Yo, you're in the studio with Leon Switch, and today I thought I'd answer a request for a video from one of my Patreons. In the request, they were asking about drums and were having problems with their drums not sounding natural enough. I figured that it might be helpful to make a simple video just showing and explaining how you can shape the drums within Ableton's drum sampler and how I treat the drums before processing so that they can sound more natural. I also point out things to think about whilst working with drums and share any tips and tricks along the way. I hope you find this video insightful and helpful. I also want to say a massive thank you to my members both on Patreon and over here on YouTube, as your support helps to keep the channel growing and supports me in making future videos. Please go and hit those like and subscribe buttons and leave me a comment below, as this helps with the algorithm and also helps me to know whether you're enjoying my content. Big up, much love, and let's jump to the video. Okay, so I've launched Ableton, and basically what I've got here is I've got from my sample series volume 1. I went into the drums, to the drum loops, and basically there's a loop here called LS Drums 140 06 full, and that sounds like this. If I press this button, turn it up a little bit. Okay, and so what I want to point out very quickly before, so my reason for picking this kit. And the reason is that I had a message from one of my Patreons, or my members on Patreon, and he said about how he's cut up a drum kit and he can't seem to make the bass drums sound natural. Which is, yeah, I get that. You've cut up a drum loop and you've now got all these different chops and all these different slices of the kit, and now you've now got to play with the envelope to make it sound more natural. I get that. So what I figured was is that I would import a drum loop, we'll cut it up, and we'll basically just, we'll go a little bit slower with it and a little bit more basic, and we'll just make the drum kit sound as natural as we can with different programming. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the drum loop here, and I'm just going to listen through. It is loud. Let's just turn it down a touch there. Cool. So let's have a look. Now, what I'm doing is I'm now watching for the transients within this. Cool, so the first hit is there. So this is one hit. So we're good. I think the transients, it's caught the transients quite nicely. We'll just double check. But these markers here are all looking like they're actually on hits, which is brilliant. Bingo, that's what we want. So yeah, cool. So what we can do now is we can right click and we can now go quantize. And we can see that it's put a warp marker on every one of these hits. And what we can do now is we can now come to here. We can right click and we can go slice to new MIDI track, and that's going to put all of these different hits across the keys, so we can now program it up. We're going to use the warp marker setting and just built-in preset and preserve the warp timing, so we can do that. Okay, brilliant. So what we want to do now is we want to just go through and just double check on these hits. The very first thing I need to do is adjust this loop length, otherwise it's just going to cycle and sound like I'm triggering it constantly. So if I hold the key once, it's looping. So if I turn the loop length down so we've got no loop, oh, lovely. Well, what we can hear is at the end of this hit, we've got like this, it sounds almost like a bit of a reverse sort of style sound. So if we bring this endpoint in, we can now hear that it sounds like a complete hit and it sounds like it ends. Now this is something that is pretty important when it comes to slicing up drums, that your drum hits are tight and that you don't have like clicks at the end or at the beginning really of your hits. So let's move on to the next one, which is C1. And the end of that one is all right, but we did take the point back, the start point back. We took the end point in, so this is going to be the start point of the next one. So I'm quite happy there. So let's go to the next hit. So I think there was a very slight sort of hit there, or click, but that sounds clean. Okay, So the start point's lovely, but this end point just has this click, and we can see on the wave file here, on the waveform. Nice. So once again, we'll take the start point back, and I'll just bring this in because we have that click. Once again, we'll take this start point back, and we've got a little bit of a at the end of it. And it's important to try and find these zero crossing points. And basically what that means is that it's the points where you've got your middle line here like this, and it's the points where it crosses over the middle point, so whether that's going up or down, as we can see here. If I zoom in, it's difficult to see on that point here, but if I come into the waveform here, we can see that we've got this middle line here, and we've got then like a zero crossing point here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then across here. You can see where it hits this line basically as a zero crossing point. So that's where you're ideally going to be pointing your start point or your end point to, and that way then you shouldn't then get any clicks, in theory. What are we on here? That's the one. Brilliant. So the next hit. So this is F#1. So once again, we've got this at the end. And there's kind of a point around here. If I can demonstrate a bit closer. We zoom in some more. I mean, if you want to be really kind of on it in that sense, you can. And sometimes you won't get it perfect because it might have some reverb on that bass drum. But you just want it to be kind of as natural as possible. So that for me, that will do. So once again, we've got this fade out at the end, and we can see the start point's not quite right here, so we'll take that to there. We'll just bring this end point in. And there's normally quite a natural kind of place. I seem to find there's quite a natural kind of falling point, you know, and it's never far from where it should be. It's just finding that sweet point. Once again, we can hear that next sort of hit coming in. We might bring this start point in. There we go. So that end point isn't perfect, but it will do. Wow, that's a loud snare. But it's a good hit. We've got no click on the end. We'll just double check on this start point here. So we could possibly bring this in. It's not hurting it there. So that's that. So what I can do is I can now go through and I can cut the rest of these. So what I will do is I'll pause you there rather than making you sit through that. Okay, so I've just gone through and done exactly what we were doing before, and I've done it to the entire kit now, so as you can hear, they're reasonably good hits. I did it very quickly, so I think there might be a couple with like a slight click at the end or whatever, but I'm not concerned for the sake of this. So the other thing that I noticed recently that was made a drastic difference to how the kit worked when I pitched it around. So if I pitched it up or if I pitched it down, this warp mode, it completely messed with how it sounded. I wasn't keen on it at all. So what I will do now is I'll go back to the original slice, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off. I think, unfortunately, there's no quick way of doing this. You literally have to click on every single slice and turn the warp off. But that is, I'm afraid, how that is. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now pause you again, and I'm going to continue to do this until I've done the entire kit. Right, so I've just done that. So I've gone through now, and I've now got no warp modes, as you can see if I click through a few of the hits. So the warp mode is now completely turned off. So the sampler now, if I pitch it up, it's going to play the samples faster. And if I pitch it down, it's going to play the samples slower. So, and that's something that I find with my drum programming and with my drum work as it was, for me, that just sounds more natural. It also comes from the old days of having the external samplers. I don't know what you can see in the video there, but this one here, and then I've got the two samplers over here. It comes from there, where we didn't have these warp modes and stuff in those samplers. You know, that it was just as is. So yeah, so that's the first two things that I would do whenever I cut a kit up. I would make sure that all of the hits are nice and tight, and there's no massive clicks at the end of any of your hits. And the second thing I would do is I would go through and I would turn the warp mode off. And now the warp mode thing isn't essential. So you might find that with some kits, the warp mode works lovely. On other kits, it doesn't. So for me, by default, I now turn it off. And for me, that just kind of works. So what we can do now is we can now delete this first audio, because we've got the drum loop in here and it's cut up, and we can delete the MIDI programming here of the drum loop. And what we can do is we can right click and insert a MIDI clip, and we can now program in some drums. So let's have a look here. Let's come down to the bottom here. Let's turn on the monitor icon. Nice. So let's start with that. Let's have a look. So let's go. Let's change the program about a bit. I'm going to keep that because it will tie in with this bass drum here. So that'll be like a towel for that. It'll have the same sort of atmosphere to it. I'm going to infill this with a different hat. Let's try it. Oh, as you can hear with that, that's got the reverbed snare with it. There we go. So let's try something like that. Okay, so that's okay. Let's just try moving this one along. Let's just delete that one off for a second and draw this out. Okay, that's a bit more natural once again. We have got this sort of funny sort of bit of air or space in between the hits, but we can play with that. So let's put the snare in. Okay, so I'm going to change this about. I don't want it to be the same programming. I'll keep that because it's the snare programming. I'm going to move it along. Once again, I'm going to do this. Okay, so I'm actually going to undo that. There we go. There we go. I'm just trying to make it so that it's not the same as the original programming. There we go. Nice. Okay, so another thing to notice is that I'm trying to use different hits for each bass drum, a different bass drum each time, and I'm trying to use different hats for. I will try my hardest not to have this happen. So if I've got a bass drum here, have exactly the same bass drum after it. When I'm programming out drum loops that have got multiple bass drums in it, even if it's the original, like the original has the same bass drum through. The drum kit has been processed. So the reverbs are going to be sitting on top of those different bass drums. The ends of the hi-hats will be sitting on top of those bass drums. There might be a hat on some of the bass drums and not others. As you can hear with this, at the very beginning, we've got like a cymbal on top of that bass drum, you know, which is kind of like, it's either a cymbal or an open hi-hat, but so you're getting just, it's a lot more realistic sort of sounding, because when a drummer plays his drums, he doesn't, every time he hits the bass drum, it's different. It's never going to be exactly the same twice, ever, you know. So you know, he can sort of stamp on it twice, and it's always going to be different, always going to be different. The same with the snare. So the snare is like, you can hit it, how he feels is exactly the same every time. But it's not going to be, you know, it's never going to be the same two hits. The same with the hats. You know, the hats are going to have bleed from the bass drum, bleed from the snare drum, bleed from the hats, you know, from the room. It all makes a massive difference. And these are all factors that make things sound real or electronic. Now, as you well know, by now I should imagine that I don't use grooves, I don't use any swing in my drums. I'm not a fan of that. That's not something I work with, I play with. So yeah, so for this, for me, is bad practice as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I can show you what I mean. So that actually didn't sound too bad because you've got this hit before it, which kind of leads it in. It's got the, if I delete that, it's never gonna sound like as good as if I was to change this bass drum, say for this one, or there we go. It's more natural. Let's put this hat back in. Nice. It's got a little bit of the cymbal with it, but it's more natural, you know, it kind of works. So let's try it. We want like a hat now. So let's come up here. There's a hat here. It's got the, as you can hear, it's got some weight with it, and it's the weight from the bass drum, you know, it's the weight from that previous hit, which makes it sound more natural, you know. So let's grab another bass drum here. What we got here? Okay. Nice. So you can start to hear what I mean by using the same sounds. It starts to sound electronic, like very much less natural than what we're looking for. So let's see if we can find another hat here. We could try something like that. It might sound, it will definitely sound more unnatural, but we can adjust the velocity a touch to see if we can get something out of it. Okay, so there's something I quite like about it. So I'm just programming some drums in, just seeing where we end up. Oh, there's a good hat there. Okay, so let's exchange that one out. Cool, I don't like this. So it's just trying to build that loop and just get it so that it's working with the groove, you know. Just being careful about the selection of drums that we're actually using, you know. Nice. So that will do us. So we're reasonably natural sounding. We've got this. We've got like quite a cool beat going on. We're using a lot of different hits throughout the loop. Lovely. So what we'll do now is we'll come back to this page here, and we'll have a look at the envelope for the drum kit now. And the envelope is where we can now start to shape the sound, you know, dynamically. So this is where we're playing with how short or how long the bass drums are, the snare drums are, the individual hits are. And I can show you that quite simply by turning off the sustain. So we've now got no sustain on these notes. So the notes basically on the drum, sorry. So the drum's we're gonna have the transient, the decay is gonna last for 600 milliseconds, and then the sample's gonna stop, you know, after 50 milliseconds of release, which we're not gonna notice. That's just not gonna make it sound less clunky. But if we bring this, okay, let's leave that there and let's listen to where we are. So already, I know the drums are too short, but they already sound like they're from the same kit. They already sound more usable. They're not so clunky. They're not so, I don't know how to explain it. They just sound cleaner. I understand that they're too short at the moment, but it just demonstrates how we can change the feel of this drum kit and the sound of the drum kit with the amplifier envelope. So let's now play with this decay some more, and we can really hear like the length of the hits. So they're super short, just the transient almost. And we're still not back to where we were, but we're kind of nice and we're kind of bouncy, and everything's kind of sounding in with keeping a lot more usable and a lot more natural, you know. I definitely think so. Nice. So the only hit I'm not really sure about in all this is this hit here. So we can hear that we've got three of the same, three hits in a row that just, they kind of don't sound like they don't sound very good together. You know, it sticks out as being as obvious. It sticks out as being obviously programmed, which is not what we're after. So let's change this. Let's change, actually not that one. Let's change the, oh, I think it is that one. Let's put this down on this other hat. That one there. See what happens with that. Okay, so we're still sounding a bit off. So let's try this M1 and let's now move this down. So it's kind of cool. There is a problem with this. I might change this one out. So let's maybe change this to a bass drum. Okay, so we're sounding better there. The drum loop is flowing nicer, you know. Let's change this. There we go. And once again, we can now come back to the envelope. And we can now try maybe even, like, because the transient's nice there, the hit's nice there. I mean, we could try extending the decay a touch. But we're starting to sound a little bit too, I don't know how to explain it, a bit too joined up, a little bit too boomy, a bit too boxy. So let's bring this back. And I suppose we are kind of just losing that reverb, I suppose, a little bit. So we can keep playing with this and we can see if we can just make it sort of hit a few sweet spots. I think around a second was quite nice for that. We could try giving it a little bit sustain. So it's less harsh when the decay finishes. We could even give it more sustain here. So that's really affected those cymbals. We try taking the decay down a touch now, we're taking that sustain up. But we're sounding a bit detached now. But that's sounding more natural. So now let's have a look at the pitch. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to slice 1. We're going to go to the controls, and we're now going to look at the transpose amount. So what we're going to do is we're now going to pitch it down, and we're going to go -3 on the transpose, and we're now going to right click on it, and we are going to copy the value to the siblings. So that is going to put this -3 across all of the keys. So we should now have a pitched down version of the kit. And as I said earlier, now that we've pitched it down, the samples will be longer. If we pitch it up, the samples will get shorter. That's just how it works now that we've taken the warp modes off. Yeah, so we should now have longer samples. So if I now adjust the decay, I'll bring the decay up. You can hear how the samples are now overlapping when they play. So the bass drum will play, and then the hi-hat will come in, but the bass drum hasn't finished playing it. So that will continue until the hi-hat, well, that will continue until it finishes. Then the hi-hat will play till it finishes. The snare will play till it finishes. So it's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting way of working. So the main things to remember there are to get your drums tight. Make sure that all of your cuts are tight. The end points is as important as the beginning points. You know, the place where your sample ends, so it doesn't click. There's no massive sort of problems at the end of your sample. You know. That's really, really, really important. The start points are just as important, obviously. You know, if your start point's off, your sample's going to sound out of time. You know, your drum loop's going to sound out of time because when it's triggering the sample, you're going to have a gap, or it's going to play too soon. It's too far through the sample. So it's definitely all worth playing with. But that's such an important part of drums. You know, and getting converting and processing audio drum loops into MIDI. So that you know, tighten up those drums, spend some time and tighten up those drums. Go through each hit, make sure the start points are right, make sure the end point's right, you know. The second thing that is super important is to then play with your decay and your sustain. Now, these two will completely change the whole feel of your drum loop, and it will be night and day, you know. As you heard, you know, we've got, and if I roll this decay back, already you can hear that's making an impact on the way the drum loop sounds. So for me now, 1.2 seconds, I'm starting to hear some overtones at the ends of the samples. So that if I bring that decay back, that will just tidy that back end of the sample up. I mean, that's not particularly, it's too much there, so let's come down. Let's try like 800 or something around there. And these settings will change every time you do a drum loop, you know, and these settings for me will change even if I use the same drum loop on two different tunes. They change every single time, you know. It's tune specific, it's taste specific, you know. You might like to have your drums boomy and lots of sort of tail end on your samples. Brilliant, go with it, you know. It's completely your call. For me, tight drums, and it is a good place to start, you know, because then if I distort these, it gives me more room. If I want to compress them, it gives me more control. Yeah, I'm all about control, definitely when it comes to music and audio and drums especially, you know. It's about having that control, and this amplifier envelope here, it gives me that control. I think that sounds nice. So let's try pitching it up. Let's go 3 on there. And now let's right click and let's go copy value to siblings again. So we've now got +3 semitones, +3 semitones on the transposition for the whole drum kit. So if I just press play, sorry. And once again, that's not sounding so natural. So let's once again come back to this envelope and let's have a look. There you go. And you can see we're just tailoring that envelope for the drum kit. It's super cool. We've got no effects on there. We've got nothing else on there. We've literally just got the drums, and we've just cut it up so that it's ready now to move forward. You know, it's ready to play with. Definitely. So you can see as I pitched it up, the sample got faster. You know, everything played quicker. The samples were shorter. You know, they played quicker. So as I pitched it down, they got longer. And that's something definitely to bear in mind. And there's nothing saying that you have to have all of your samples at the same pitch. No, they don't have to be at all. So if I leave, say, the snare, which is, there you go. So slice 4 can remain at +3 semitones, and then we'll come to the bass drum and I'll turn that down to, or we'll just go back to the original pitch. Then we've now got just this bass drum at 0, and I think the rest of the kit is all pitched up by 3 semitones. So you can pitch your drums about, you know, that's something that's quite cool with snares. Let's grab that one, let's come in here. Right, where am I using that? There. So if I grab that snare, and I come back, what am I doing? So it's this one, and then we pitch this one down. That's where I got confused. So I'll pitch this one down. So let's go -1. There we go. And now you'll hear. Nice. So So you get the idea. So if I reset this kit all back to 0, so that's all of the cuts all back at 0 transposition, so everything's back at the original pitch. Nice. And there we go. So I think, I'm hoping that's gone in a bit more and shown you how, like a little bit more of a simplified version of how I work with drums. We don't need to effect it up. We don't need to go there. You know, we've got other videos on that. This was just to explain about cutting up drums and about the lengths of the individual drums and how that can be changed quite simply, and the effect that has on the overall kit. So anyway, much love. I hope that's been insightful and helpful. Go check out the like button and the subscribe button. Give them a click and come and join the members. Definitely. They're getting all the samples for all the videos. So and the videos early as well, you know. So definitely. Much love, big up, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.